Hello, I'm Patrick Daly and I'm one of the team at the Rural Doctors Association of Australia. Each year, RDAA and the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine, or ACRRM, offer excellence awards that recognise some outstanding rural generalist doctors and some inspiring future doctors as well. Today's podcast features Dr. Salma Hanif, one of two doctors who received the ACRRM-RDAA Rural Registrar of the Year award for 2022. Salma is a Fijian doctor who's been delivering dedicated care to the remote New South Wales community of Boggabri, with just her and one other colleague providing the town's only medical service for the past few years. Along the way, she's also had to contend with the COVID pandemic and even a record-breaking mouse plague. While in Boggabri, Salma's been undertaking advanced GP training with ACRRM via the Remote Vocational Training Scheme's Targeted Recruitment program, a program that helps deliver doctors to communities of high medical workforce need. I spoke with Salma in the lead up to this year's Rural Medicine Australia conference in Canberra. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet on across Australia as we listen to this podcast. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners who may be joining us. Salma, congratulations on receiving the ACRRM-RDAA Rural Registrar of the Year award for 2022. What was your reaction when you found out?
I was quite surprised and very thankful at the same time. It was interesting to hear of it. I wasn't even aware that I was being nominated for it. So it was interesting to find out, and I'm very thankful, yeah.
So describe your childhood in Fiji. What was it like, and did you have a rural upbringing at all?
I did. I've primarily grown up rural back home in Fiji. It was a lovely upbringing, and I think it's something that the kids, the millennials, will probably miss. We were very much in touch with nature and a communal sort of living where you always had lots of friends to play with, to talk with. It was, I think it was a lovely communal bringing.
So what area in Fiji did you grow up?
So I grew up along the Coral Coast area, mostly, and for medical school, ended up going to the capital city for medical school training for 6 years, where I did walk afterwards there for a bit as well. So most of my time was along the Coral Coast.
A lovely
Singatoka is the name of the town. Yeah.
Lovely place to grow up.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's known for one of the famous beaches called Natandola Beach, and it's home to the now Intercontinental Resort and Spa. So we grew up along those beaches. We had public access to it, but now the resort has access to the finest part of the beaches. But it was lovely growing up that end.
And what about the move to Suva for medical school? How did you find that?
It was quite a bit of a change for a country girl who's lived in the country and had a lot more in terms of family life, I suppose. So I went to the medical school, dormitories, individual living, going to lectures and stuff. It was quite a bit of a change, but quite a welcome change as well. Friends that I made along the medical school are my family now, are literally part of a family sort of life now. So it was interesting meeting new friends from lots of different towns with lots of different backgrounds, and I made lots of long-lasting relationships along those medical school years. So I'm very grateful for that.
So what got you interested in studying medicine? Did you have some exposure to rural medicine or to medicine when you were growing up that got you interested in thinking about medicine as a career?
Yeah, I would say I had lots of sudden deaths in families when I was a little kid. So I probably didn't know much about medicine, but I did want to change that. I'm not sure if I have, but that was the first sort of trigger point. Like, why are my uncles just, dying from sudden cardiac related issues? And they're fairly young, like 40s, 50s, were no age to die. So obviously that developed into medical school interest. I took up science as a study, and my career teachers, they advised and helped along the way, and they sort of helped me build on the the affinity I had for medicine already, and they helped me guide and shape and get into a training. So back home, I was lucky enough to be awarded the Australian Aid Scholarship to get into medicine, and that helped with the financial burden of paying for 6 years of medical school. So that was a bonus, and I'm very thankful to AusAid for helping me get into medical school.
So was there any other career you were looking at before medicine, or was it always going to be medicine?
It was always going to be science related. So it could have been biomedical engineering, pharmacy. There were a few other things I was interested in, but there was a great need for doctors back home. There still is. And I think the school career advisors and planners, they helped us, they helped us think along those lines as to where the country's needs were. And that's where I ended up landing, because we were in the science stream.
Now, you've said your early medical days in Fiji were a steep learning curve. How did that help to shape your career and also your medical training experience and your early medical experiences?
Yeah, it was interesting. Unlike here in Australia, you once you have finished internship, you literally become in charge of shifts and you manage pretty much everything on your own. It's scary. It's scary on day one, but you learn. You have help. You have distant phone help sort of thing, and obviously you have referral centers, but you literally pretty much on your own most days with your shifts and on calls and decision making and stuff. So as much as it started on the heavy end, it did help molding discipline, punctuality, handling responsibilities, handling staff on your shift, and also managing crowd numbers. So it was a lot of things at once in terms of being in the early days and being handed over those responsibilities. I was even responsible for handling airport emergencies, like any emergencies that could come through aviation. And this was in the first year of post internship. So I would say, yes, it all started off on the heavy end. But I'm grateful for those experiences. We had training, we had supportive training to help us to be able to cope with those scenarios if and when they arose. But it definitely was steep.
Now, speaking of airports, you eventually decided to move to Australia, and I think first to Tasmania. What got you interested in working in Australia as a doctor, and what took you to Tasmania to start with?
Yeah, so I always liked preventative medicine and GP. I loved doing a mix of things. I think over the 3-4 years post internship, I wasn't able to put my mind as to one particular specialty. So I wanted to do fellowship in GP training. Back in Fiji, there is no particular training offered in GP fellowship. If you did want to do a fellowship, you'd have to leave the country and do it from abroad. So I thought, why not go and live and do it? Because it would probably make life a bit easier doing a training in another country. So it was distant learning would have been quite difficult and expensive. So that prompted the move, and ending up in Tasmania, that's why I landed my first job. So my application got through and I was in Burnie Hospital for 3 years.
How did you go going from the more tropical climes of Fiji to the fairly cool temperatures I'm imagining in Burnie?
It was a shocker. It was a cold shock. It was one island to another. So Fiji is an island and Tasmania is another bigger island. And so it was from one island to another, just a very colder one. Yes, it took me a good 6 months to acclimatize. And
a few parkas.
Yeah, had to buy lots of puffer jackets and heaters and all that, which we were never used to back home. Because obviously my suitcase that I brought from Fiji was of no use. The clothing wasn't suitable to Tasmania. But yeah, we had supportive friends around. Obviously, there was no family members back there, but your work colleagues, they were lovely. They were supportive throughout, and it became quite a enjoyable 3 years actually down in Tassie.
And that was all at Burnie Hospital?
Yes, all my 3 years were at Burnie Hospital.
And then it was a move to Boggabri, which is a pretty isolated community in northwest New South Wales, and it's where you are now. The
Yep.
nearest tertiary care is around 90 kilometres away in Tamworth, and you commenced your advanced GP training towards your ACRRM fellowship via the RVTS targeted recruitment pathway. What took you to Boggabri, and why did you decide on a career in general practice?
Yeah, so I wanted to GP training from back in Fiji. So that was while I was in Tassie, I was working towards my general registration. So it took a few years to sort of do that, and took another 6 months to land the job, which was in Boggabri. So I was accepted on the training pathway, I suppose. There was lots of pathways, but RVTS provided a very smooth entry, I would say. It didn't have any obligations in terms of residency and things, and it still allowed me to get into the training pathway without much hurdles. And so I ended up committing to RVTS for training pathway, and Boggabri had an available position. So it was just how my luck worked out.
And what was your first impression of Boggabri when you first arrived, both of the town, of the landscape, and also was there much of a culture shock for you?
Yes, I would definitely. It looked quite small and isolated. That was my first impression. But I think the community, as time went on, has grown on me. As much as it's small, it's got its own warm culture to it, and the people here are lovely. They are very respectful. The town, you don't have much in terms of facilities and stuff, but I think my work here has been quite enjoyable and rewarding, and I think the people have really grown on me. They've been lovely.
And what about undertaking your fellowship through ACRRM via the RVTS pathway? How have you found the training experience through the pathway?
Very enriching and fulfilling. ACRRM pathway has been quite helpful, and I'm still doing it, and I'm seeing that it's helping me shape my career. And without the support of RVTS, I think it would have been really difficult. But there have been an enormous support in providing the educational support, the ongoing training support, and how and when to do things. So those sort of things were very helpful from RVTS end. I find the RVTS and ACRRM works well collaboratively, and I just had a meeting with 2 people via RVTS and ACRRM just today at 11 in the morning. So I think their support is what helps you get the training done.
You mentioned the welcoming community at Boggabri just a little bit earlier. And I understand at least one local has learned a few words in your Fijian language. And there was also a very welcome, public welcome in the local bowling club one night. Can you tell me about both of those instances?
Yes, there's a lovely 80-something-year-old lady who loves talking to me, greeting me in my home language, and she'll go away saying goodbye in my home language. So she'll greet me with a bula, and she'll go away saying vinaka, which means thank you. And she doesn't forget to do it. She does it every visit, and she's adorable, lovely patient of mine. And yes, the welcome was awesome. Lovely food. I think we had some local fish, and it was the local colleagues and stuff. We had a bit of dinner. It was awesome.
You arrived in Boggabri pretty much right at the start of the COVID pandemic. Tell me about that experience, what it entailed, and I think it also included getting behind the wheel of a fairly large truck, from what I've been told.
Yes. It was a shocker. Obviously, no one expected COVID, but it landed on our shores. But when I think of it, I think it was quite a blessing in disguise. I did not mind at all being in a rural and remote community in the midst of huge lockdowns and COVID, when it was mostly touching the bigger cities and centers. So we felt quite protected and supported in our community, because the regional communities were sort of in a lockdown, so it reduced the incidence of transmission. So it was a good place to be when the pandemic was trying to sort itself out, I guess. And We did mobile respiratory clinics. I think it's one of the very few, I think 4, so statewide, state-led respiratory clinics. So through our workplace, we were helping out, going to 3 to 4 communities every week, 3 to 4 times a week to do respiratory clinics, COVID checks and stuff. And that also helped keep COVID out of the clinic doors. And we learned. I had never done this before. We learned on the go. We had supportive team telling us about infection control and things. And I think, touch wood, that has kept us safe for a while from COVID infections.
And did you find that you needed to rely on your skills as a long-distance truck driver there for a while with the mobile clinic?
Yes. Getting on the caravan was interesting. I'd never driven a caravan in my life, but it was all part of the learning, and I think I liked it.
Just tell me a little bit too about how isolated you felt being away from your family during the COVID pandemic, being in a remote town in Australia while your family were over in Fiji.
Yeah, that was a difficult time, I must admit. Lockdowns, families far away, and coping with work and the added responsibilities. It was a difficult juggle, but it worked out all right. I think I have supportive colleagues at work in the medical center, and there's lovely staff down at the hospital end as well. So we continued to interact, talk, and have a bit of, I guess, our own debrief sessions during those times, and they did things together to sort of keep the momentum and liveliness going. The staff have been lovely. I would get cakes dropped on my medical center in my rooms. Some of them when they know you've had a hard week or you've had a rough on call. So they have been very warm and accepting, and I think supportive, understanding the stresses you go through. In the community as well, you would sometimes come home from the clinic, you could see a pumpkin at your doorstep or some silver bead or something. So patients who know you, they do leave a little token of appreciation behind. And I think that level of acceptance in the community is what kept me going.
And was there support provided by RBTS and ACRRM during that time as well?
Yes. We were always, we had webinars, workshops where we were told of what supports we could use if and when we felt we needed to. We had emails provided to us, support numbers. And I think that we were always well informed about what support services we had to sort of get us through these difficult times. Yep.
Now, I'm interested to know a little bit about your work mix at Boggabri, and I understand you and another GP registrar have been the sole providers of medical care in Boggabri for a few years now. So I'm interested in learning about the work mix there, what the challenges have been, and also what this experience has taught you in terms of coping in an under-resourced environment.
Yes, it's just 2 of us, and we share on call between the 2 of us, which means going on call 24/7, 7 days a week, every second week. So that's quite exhausting in itself, and I wouldn't put it in any other way. It's exhausting. What keeps us going? I guess you have to find a balance in terms of walking, your exercise, keeping your personal health good, the other registrar and myself, we've had a very amicable relationship where we covered for each other if the other one needed some time off on her week on call, or someone needed to travel, because we didn't really have too much to bank on. So the amicable relationship between the 2 of us, I think, has helped. And we've both enjoyed a good 3 years together.
And what does it mean for the local community if you weren't there as doctors? Would it be travelling to Tamworth for the nearest available care?
Yes, if the medical center and the emergency were not operational, they would probably need to travel to Gunnedah, which is a town 30 minutes away, and another town, Narrabri, which is almost an hour away. So it would involve a little bit more of traveling. And I think the town's very appreciative of having at least 2 doctors in town where they can come for all their acute care needs.
Do you rely on retrieval much during a normal week in Boggabri? Is there much retrieval that's required?
Yes, occasionally we do end up having chopper retrievals or even road retrievals. It's not an everyday thing, but at least once a week you might end up needing such services. So we do have a good support from the retrieval team whenever we've needed to. I think so far in my 3 years, I've done 2 to 3 chopper retrievals, and maybe similar for my friend. It's occasional, but it's there, and we have had to use it.
So what about the highlights of your time at Boggabri and any amusing or heartwarming moments you've had while you've been there?
Highlights, I suppose, learning to drive the caravan. And pioneering the mobile respiratory clinics. It was an interesting learning curve, I suppose. I've always sort of practiced in the medical center in the rooms, so that was easy, but this was a bit different. And we've weathered it in all conditions, be it rain, sun, or wind. We were always there in all weathers, in the tents, or even with the tents flying away. We've done the respiratory clinics as and where it was. So that was quite a bit of a highlight, I suppose, and a learning curve. And there's lots of special moments, but I think I've sort of talked about a few of those where you have staff dropping in treats when you've had a rough week, and patients bringing in jam, homemade jam. Not that you've requested, but they do it out of their kindness, and it's a nice warm feeling to get those little things from them.
It sounds like the local community has been welcoming towards you as someone from another culture.
Yes, they have been very accepting, inquisitive. Yes, initially when they would come in, they would ask, "Oh, where are you from and what?" And I think it was just for them to sort of know. And like I said, some of them would come and talk to me about if they've traveled to Fiji. They tell me about their holidays. And this little lady who ends up greeting me in my own language, so I think they have been very accepting, is what I would say.
How has fitting in your own religious practices worked for you in Boggabri? Has that been easy or difficult?
Not difficult at all. There was no qualms about it. I think I was concerned over it because obviously I don't think there's much in terms of religious supports groups or anything down in Boggabri, but the population, the practice, they have all been very accepting.
Speaking of highlights, and I suspect this may not be a highlight, but I understand you have a fear of mice, which probably meant you had to draw pretty significantly on your positive and uncomplaining nature while living through the worst mouse plague that Boggabri had ever seen.
Yeah, that wasn't pleasant. That was a shocker. And when in Rome, do as Romans do. So I had to obviously talk to the locals and get their help. You know, what would help me, which little mice product to use to help get rid of them and things. So yeah, the locals were my eyes and ears, and I think I sort of curbed it all right. But I did have to end up picking a few dead mice here and there, which wasn't what I wanted.
At the worst of the plague, what was the situation there?
Yeah, they would be running around rampant in the ceilings, in the house, in the garage. You'd open up your garage and you'd find a few dead in there. So it was rampant. It was quite obvious. But with the help of some tools from my friends and staff and colleagues, I think was able to handle it.
Managed to get through it. And the plague's pretty much over now?
Yeah, no, I don't really see much anymore. And I think in the past 6 to 12 months, I haven't seen one dead mice. So it must be settling down.
Cross fingers it stays that way. Now, while you've been in Boggabri, you've engaged a number of distance specialists, including a geriatrician and a palliative care consultant, to ensure better continuity of care for your local patients. What's it taken to get these specialists engaged in providing this care as an outreach model? And what difference has it made for your patients? What was there beforehand and what is there now for them?
I think it was establishing who's available, who's willing to take on new patients. So doing a bit of footwork and groundwork when I initially landed. Obviously, it was difficult on day one. I had no idea who I could refer to. As much it was there on the system, but you would always find this particular person is not taking new patients, or he or she can't accommodate. So it took a few months to sort of get groundwork done. But once the relationship was established and communication to and from had started, I think I've built on that and maintained it. And I've got lots of good specialists, cardiologists, respiratory physicians, spell care. They've all been supportive once I've engaged with them and communicated with them. And the patients have benefited for them. They have had improved outcomes in terms of their health and ongoing support. So that has been quite a important change in terms of clinical patient care, I suppose.
Because I'm gathering it's an ageing population in Boggabri, so geriatricians, palliative care, some of those areas are actually quite critical. And also the absence of them means that older people need to travel long distances to access that care otherwise.
Yeah. Tamworth is the nearest town where you get all these specialist appointments. So yes, it's a primarily aging population. We do have availability of HECs. I think they end up transporting these patients. Some of them, when they're really difficult to get going, we have patient transport access, which we arrange. And otherwise, there's lots of good children who drive their parents around, and I still see that here, and it's very interesting to see that you've got that still going. Yeah, there are lots of supportive kids who drive their parents around for specialist appointments, or would go with them, sit with them, and so that's quite nice to watch done in this small town here. Yeah, I think that those little few adjuncts that we've had has helped maintain continuity of care.
So do you have the specialists actually visiting Boggabri on a regular basis now, or is it more just being able to ensure access for your patients to the specialists in Tamworth and other larger areas?
It had all stopped during COVID. They might have been visiting when I wasn't there, because I started in 2020 and there was nothing like that going on for 2020, 2021. But luckily this year we've just had endocrinologists visit us and give specialist level input to a few of our diabetic patients. So it has started again. They came with a full team of the doctor, the nurse, the educator. So we had a full team who came in and saw our patients face to face and gave us, the GP's, advice. So we've got communication and rapport with them, and they have promised to visit us again in 6 months. So I think we'll pick up pace again, given the lockdowns have ended. So we'll build on that.
And looking at care of Indigenous patients in your community, I'm assuming that was one area that was probably fairly new to you when you arrived in Boggabri. How did you find that particular aspect of care and providing it, and what have been your experiences in terms of engagement with the First Nations people in your community?
Yes, this definitely was fairly new to me, and went in with open ears and eyes, I suppose. Absorbed all the information that I could get via my training portals through RACGP and ACRRM. And I think that has been a stepping stone, because without the background and the knowledge, it would have been difficult to understand things about the lost generation, and there's so much more to it than that. But that has definitely helped. And RVTS does continuous education and training through their workshops. And that's also been very enlightening and helpful. And yeah, I have actually helped quite a few Aboriginal patients down this end. There's supportive teams in terms of there's a local medical center, Healthwise, which helps support Aboriginal patients for their allied health input and needs. So we do have a bit of community level support available for them as well.
And what about the cultural education and safety training that RVTS provides? Have you found that a useful tool in being able to provide health services to First Nations people in your community?
Yes, yes, they definitely RVTS has been the backbone of providing such information, putting up modules and stuff on their portal, which we do and train, and that helps us in the understanding of the First Nations people when the clinical cases do come through, understanding the subtleties, the little differences, and how you incorporate it into practice. I think I didn't have much in terms of a background, so this was all during my training with RVTS and the GP colleges is when I gained this knowledge.
So in terms of palliative care, you've become interested in palliative care and seen a need in palliative care in your community to the point where you've decided to undertake your advanced skills training in palliative care. What was the catalyst in growing your interest in that outside the work you're doing in your community? And did it surprise you how much interest you developed in this area?
I think, yes, it was primarily that there was a need in the community. And I also do nursing home care for the patients at Boggabri MPS. And initially, when I started, I did feel there was a bit of knowledge gap because that wasn't something that I would have done too much in the undergrad years or even in my ED. So building on support from the physicians, the local referring physician, a few of training modules that I did, and I felt it's a very rewarding thing to do, to take care of a patient towards their end of life and terminal illness. And doing it for the past 3 years has sort of, I think I've liked this as a specialty, and that's what's led me on to think I could probably do it as a bit more of an advanced skill for a 1-year training, hoping that I'll get in next year.
So was it surprising to you that you grew an interest in this area? Was it something you weren't expecting?
I wasn't actually expecting this, honestly. I felt if I wanted to do a specialty skill, it might have been emergency, and because I've done 3 years of emergency in Tassie, but so it was from complete, busy life or rather shift work sort of thing to something which is more towards the end of life care and things. Yeah, it was quite a change, but I think it was definitely taking care of a cohort of patients during this time is what sort of ended up in helping me decide that I want to do this as a specialty now.
So in terms of accessing training for palliative care, the advanced skills training, how will that pan out next year for you?
I honestly am not sure. I have submitted applications. It's a little bit of wait and see sort of thing. We have done some homework and some applications and things which I'm just waiting on the outcome. But I'm hoping it works out. And yes, I just had a meeting with RVTS and ACRRM this morning about that to sort of see where I could place myself. It's not the quite streamlined process, I would say, because you are a rural generalist and you're sort of stepping into an arena where it's primarily owned by physicians. It's an internal medicine specialty. So it's fairly new to GP, and ACRRM's added it to their AST quite recently. So we're all learning, but I've got a very supportive team. So I'm hopeful that I'll get through.
So what other areas of medicine have surprised you in terms of areas that you didn't think you'd be interested in, but now you are?
Mental health. You'd be surprised. I don't think I saw myself interested in that in as a specialty or as a field. Probably when I started in the first year of post internship, but I do like doing it now, and I have set up myself to sort of get some specialized courses and skills in that. And I think once I've done my PAL care, I might do some extra skills in mental health. I think that's also very rewarding and quite a needed field in GP land as well.
Have you been surprised how much of a need there is for mental health care in a rural area like Boggabri, in a remote town?
I have been surprised, yes, honestly, that it's a huge burden. I think based on my numbers, at least 20% of my presentations are mental health, and I think if you don't pay attention to that, sometimes the puzzle doesn't fall into place until and unless you sort of put in attention to a certain aspect of mental health. So I found that it is increasing in need, and definitely it would be a good area to add some skills on in future.
And did that mainly stemmed out of the COVID pandemic, do you think, or is it wider than that? The need for mental health care, or the drive for mental health care in remote towns?
It was pre-existing. We've had natural disasters even pre-COVID, the drought, then there was the fires in, was it 2019? And then obviously COVID hit. It's been a roller coaster of traumatic events for the populations, one after the other. And mental health was on the rise even before that. So obviously these natural disasters haven't helped. They've actually caused a increase in the need, and the lockdowns and things haven't helped. So yeah, I reckon the need is increasing, and we do need to prioritize mental health going forward.
So looking forward 10 years, where do you plan to live and work? And again, looking forward to the next decade, what do you think your ideal practice mix will be?
Yeah, I think I would probably be practicing in a GP/VMO kind of responsibility going forward. Probably remote. I'm not sure where, but I'm thinking New South Wales. A bit more familiar with the state and its procedures and protocols now. So it's something that I can build on, and I don't have to go and start from scratch sort of thing. So I'm not sure which corridor of New South Wales, but I'm willing to try on a new mix of GP with the GP VMO role as well.
And will there be a return to Fiji, do you think, to work as a doctor in the future?
Haven't thought about it, honestly. I could. I haven't maintained my registration, so that would be a bit of a juggle to go and try and practice back home. Would definitely go home for holidays. In terms of practicing, I suppose if a need arises and friends and colleagues identify a need, I would definitely go down to help any day.
And you can't see yourself becoming a full-time caravan driver in the future?
Probably not. I can barely drive my car, I think.
Well, Salma, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and congratulations again on your award.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.
And that was Dr. Salma Hanif, the ACRRM-RDAA Rural Registrar of the Year for 2022. And the good news is that since speaking with Salma, she's had her training position in palliative care confirmed at Tamworth, commencing in 2023. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I look forward to having you tune in again. Until next time, happy days.